provide value back to the ecosystem that you serve.
Do you want to impact the world and still turn a profit? Then you're in the right place. Welcome to Growth Everywhere. This is the show where you'll find real conversations with real entrepreneurs. They'll share everything from their biggest struggle to the exact strategies they use on a daily basis. So if you're ready for a value-packed interview, listen on. Here's your host, Eric Siu.
Before we jump into today's interview, if you guys could leave a review and a rating and also subscribe as well, that would be a huge help to the podcast. So if you actually enjoy the content and you'd like to hear more of it, please support us by leaving us a review and subscribe to the podcast as well. Thanks so much. All right, everybody. Today we have Todd Krizelman, who's the co-founder and CEO of MediaRadar. Todd, how's it going?
It's going great. Thanks for having me.
Yeah, thanks for being here. So why don't you give us a little background on kind of who you are and what you do?
Sure, of course. So I'm the CEO of a company called MediaRadar. MediaRadar is a firm that is helping ad sales people and agency business development people who are doing sales find and identify the best prospects that they should actually go pursue. And the part we're most known for is basically filling in the blanks, almost like CliffsNotes for ad salespeople. We help you understand what information you need to know when you're talking to a brand to pitch. Basically, it helps them figure out how to be a good partner.
Got it. Wonderful. And where did the idea come from?
The idea for MediaRadar came from working in the industry. So I had worked in both digital ad sales and then magazine ad sales, selling print pages. This is like 15 years ago. And I noticed that there were just very few tools to help salespeople do their job. There was no Bloomberg terminal for media people, for ad sellers.
Got it. Okay. And so how does the whole model work? I guess maybe a better question is, how do you guys make money?
Sure. So MediaRadar is sold as a subscription. It's available through both an app as well as on a desktop computer. And the business model is we charge an annual subscription for an ad sales team to have access to the MediaRadar platform. 100% of our business is subscription through essentially, some people will call it SaaS or software through a subscription. But it's that business model.
Got it. Okay, cool. And I think for just even me to understand better, are there any kind of case studies that you can speak to where agency A used this and then their conversion rates jumped up by 200% or something like that?
Yeah, sure. Well. So I can't give a specific name because customers really prohibit that and dislike it, but I can definitely talk about it. So as an example, almost every fashion site and magazine uses MediaRadar. Almost every broadcaster in America, their ad sales team uses MediaRadar. Typically for the average sales rep, we will increase their sales between 8 to 18% in the first year. So if someone was selling $1 million at a minimum, we would expect them to sell, almost 1.1 million. We would expect that bump immediately.
Got it. Okay. And when you say ad sales, what kind of advertising agencies, for example, are using this? I'm assuming it's not the traditional kind of, digital marketing agency, or is it?
So first of all, know that most of our business is with actually the people selling the ads. So it's
got it. Okay.
So it could be an ad sales rep at a magazine, a website, a broadcaster, and it can be. What makes it sort of interesting is it's across not only any media format, like digitally, it could be both programmatic as well as direct. For those who are listening, the difference is basically computer-based trading of advertising versus selling advertising the good old-fashioned way by phone or by human. But for us, the business is completely agnostic to media format. We work with people selling newspapers, magazines, whether it's video, all of the above benefit from the service.
Got it. Okay. Makes total sense now. Okay, cool. So what are some numbers you can speak to around the business day, whether it's revenues, customers, growth rates, things like that?
Sure. So we can talk in terms of number of customers. We have a little over 2,000 current customers in MediaRadar. The growth rate has grown, sort of fluctuates between 30 and 40% per year, and that's been the last 5 years. That becomes, I think, more more challenging every year as we grow because I think it is a game of trying to figure out how to both penetrate the market better. So that means basically selling more of the existing stuff to the same customers, as well as expanding into new markets and trying to add customers in adjacent markets. So it's both areas we have to grow if we're going to keep up that growth rate.
Got it. Wonderful. And I think you might have mentioned earlier too. So these are probably annual deals. So the average customer, how much are they paying typically?
The median customer of MediaRadar is about $25,000. It varies based on the modules that people buy. So, but on the median, I would say that's about right.
Got it. Okay. Wonderful. So I think walk me through, I guess, early days. And I do want to jump back to, I'll jump back to this other question later, but early days, how did you go about getting, let's just say, your first 100 customers or so?
So the first 100 customers, we had a real strategy for thinking about in the beginning. So one, we wanted the first 20 customers to be really small, like not well-known companies. This is a B2B business, so we do not have, it's a B2B in a single vertical. So that means we don't have like a product that we sell horizontally to millions of clients. It's really, there are about 15,000 possible customers we might ever sell to. So we wanted to choose brands that we thought were smaller that first could make a decision. So like bigger companies sometimes take a year to sign. So we were a startup, so we focused on people who we thought, good or bad, could give us quick feedback, and if they liked it, they could buy and we could move on. And two, we thought about the first 20 being smaller and mid-sized companies because we wanted to work it out, sort of work on the product and hear people's feedback before we went to some of the big conglomerates. We worried that the big conglomerates, if we didn't have it all perfect, and we didn't, if we had challenges with the product, that we could work them out with smaller clients who would be better partners, better listeners, companies and people who wanted to be involved with an entrepreneurial venture. Our experience for sure was good with that. But with bigger companies, we found that they didn't want to be guinea pigs. They wanted to be buying fully baked products. And so in the first 20 customers, we were just interested in people doing essentially, knowing that they were going to be guinea pigs. After that, we really started with companies that we thought the next 80 after the first 20, we looked for companies that we thought could make decisions quickly. And so there were plenty of companies that we would have loved to have, but we thought they would spend a year to a year and a half evaluating our MediaRadar. And that was too long for a startup. You have no money. You're trying to just make ends meet. So the beginning was really targeting customers by their likelihood to make a decision and buy quickly.
And how do you determine kind of which companies you thought were going to move quickly versus the slow ones?
So we ruled out any company that was publicly held. We ruled out any company that we thought had a procurement department, basically like a whole level of review and process that we would be ill prepared for. So we looked for companies that were privately held. We looked for companies that had more than 50 employees but fewer than 500.
Got it. Makes total sense. Okay, cool. And if I'm doing some back of the envelope math right here, so 2,000 paying customers, median 25K, is it safe to say last year maybe you did close to or around 50 million?
Yeah, that's right.
Cool. Great. And then, so sounds like a lot of hand-to-hand combat. I ask that question all the time, and it's really interesting that you got the kind of 20 first and then 80 next. So it's always interesting, the stories I hear. I'm also curious, for how you guys are going about acquiring customers today, I guess what's one effective thing that's working for you from a marketing perspective or even sales perspective?
So from a marketing perspective, I think the playbook has been the same for many years. The most important thing I have learned, and I didn't learn it in this job, but it was reinforced to me in this job, was provide value back to the ecosystem that you serve, right? So we're not selling to millions of customers. We only have to be in front of 15,000, but that means we have to really be known to them, right? And not just being known doesn't mean that there's awareness, top of funnel awareness. There has to be giving back to the industry. So that means providing insights for free to most companies just about the quality and health of the marketplace, the media market is really confusing and complicated right now. Like lots of people having lots of success, but an equal number of people really struggling. And so that means sharing information is, at a high level for sure. It means thought leadership, speaking at many events, sponsoring, just spending money and being a good economic partner. So a lot of the events wouldn't take place if there weren't sponsors to host and sort of pay for these events. We proudly sponsor probably 25 events per year. And a lot of that is to signal to the market that we know what it means to be a partner. And so from a marketing strategy, there's very little. At these conferences, we don't try to sell anything. We don't get on stage and say, here's the latest version of MediaRadar. It's really talking about what's happening in the industry, how we can be a good partner. That's the number one thing we've done as a marketing process that's been effective.
Got it. And nowadays people talk about how, sponsoring events can be a huge time suck because you're sitting in the booth the whole time. So it sounds like you're actually doing more than that. And then I guess so that is the question. Are you doing more than just having a booth? And then I'll go to my next question.
So to that question, yes, we do the booths, but we do everything else too. And I would share, conferences and events are expensive and big investments generally. And I'm not sure it's the right solution for all software businesses, for example. But if you're in a very narrow vertical, right, where, the population of people all know one another really well, like they look forward to these meetings, they're friends, they're not just competitors, being a thought leader and a partner, we hear it over and over, is really important to why people will initially get started with us, like to take a meeting and sort of give us consideration, put us in the consideration set.
Right, because you're there anyway, and then the in-person always helps increase conversion rates.
Yes, there's no question.
Cool. And so how do you guys measure, I'm assuming, a conference you might spend, 10 grand, 30 grand, 50 grand. How do you measure the ROI of a conference?
That's a great question. It's taken us all the years I've been doing this to get close to the answer. So one is collecting information everywhere on the sort of the path to becoming a customer, right? So if I shook someone's hand and we actually talked at an event, I'll write it down. And that will later, when I get back to the main office, the marketing team, who has responsibility for this, will put that into a database. And it might just say, Todd shook hand. No real, it might just be introduction, right?
Right.
But that person over a period of years might see me speak at 4 or 5 events. They might download a white paper or attend a webinar online. They might come to the public website. Over time, we build profiles on people to try to help us understand how, what is our relate. A lot of times you don't really know your relationship with the level of exposure. So when we go to conferences, we keep track of who we're talking to and what we said and what was the degree of interest and degree of dialogue, and that gets filed away. I saw that on your site, you had the interview with the CEO of Visible. I think tools like Visible and HubSpot and Marketo go a long way to making it possible to tie all those data points together.
Cool. So then I'm assuming it sounds like you guys are getting really granular, like Todd shook hand, for example, and then it's basically it's sitting in your CRM. But then over time, you're basically playing the long game. Everyone, especially a lot of people on this podcast, they want things to happen. Long is 1 year, but in reality, we're talking over a couple years, right? It sounds like you guys are playing that long game.
Yes, if we're saying a year is long, then we're playing the long game. I would say like we're an enterprise SaaS business, maybe enterprise light, but for sure we think relationships are built over time. I think it's very hard to force. Sometimes it happens, but very hard to force a true relationship. And in many ways, I think you have to earn the right. We talk about this a lot with our sales reps. You have to earn the right to talk to someone. You can't just send marketing spam. You have to you have to show them that you know something about their business that they don't know that could be valuable to them. You have to earn the right to have an initial conversation.
So before we go any further, I just wanted to tell you about a problem that entrepreneurs have been coming to me with. They don't know what they need to do next to grow their business, or they don't have the right resources to execute on marketing needs. Oftentimes, they don't have a marketing strategy, or they don't know who or what to hire for. If this sounds like something that you've been dealing with, I have a solution for you. Single Grain is a growth marketing agency ran by yours truly that has worked with venture-backed startups to Fortune 500 companies to help solve their marketing issues. Our strong points are in SEO and paid advertising, and if you need help in other areas, we're always happy to tap into our network of highly vetted vendors that we can even help manage for you. So there's no need to stress yourself out trying to find the right people for the job because we've got you covered. So if you're interested in this, just go to growtheverywhere.com/help to get more information. Once again, that's growtheverywhere.com/help. I totally agree with that. And this is something I tell my team all the time. It's like, you're investing now. We're making deposits in the bank right now to be able to withdraw later. And then I just remember last week, when I was walking around at SaaStr, which is a SaaS conference, and just walking by, and then people are just like, "Oh, podcast guy," or like, "Hey, I listen to your podcast, man." I think that starts the touch point, and that starts a conversation down the road, and who knows what's going to happen. So I think it's really important for people to understand that. I just keep preaching this over and over, not just on this podcast, but the other podcast, Marketing School. So I guess my next question for you is, tell me about your biggest failure, and it doesn't have to be just this company; it just could be overall.
Oh God, Eric, there are so many. Okay. Well, in my last company, I did something that certainly impacted me. In my last company, which I spent 10 years of my life on at a company called The Globe, I never did the job of sales. I was a young CEO. I was an entrepreneur. I was a product guy, essentially.
You're 20 years old, right?
I was a little older. When I started, I was probably 21, and I exited basically when I was 30. But I never had the courage to do sales in that job. I always thought sales was for others who specialized in it, and always. If we missed the number, or if we released a product that was not good enough, the sales team would say, you don't know, you're not out there on the front lines like me. And I think that really weighed on me. I never, in this company at MediaRadar, the whole entire time I have sold. And even as we've become a much larger firm, I still spend 60% of my hours, 50 to 60% every week on selling. And so I think there is a huge value for a CEO to meet with clients, to hear what they like, to hear their concerns. I think you just understand the market and how they perceive you and value your product. And two, I think you're internally, I think you are leading the charge, right? You're not the armchair quarterback. You are leading your firm into battle. And sometimes that's humbling. Sometimes you feel really wonderful when it works out. But that was one of the biggest failures in my last company, was not taking full ownership, not really putting myself out there on the front lines every day.
Got it. And well, so in your early 20s, that you took that company public, right?
I did.
Wow. Okay, amazing. But it just shows that even the CEOs always have to be selling. So ABS, always be selling. Is there any other lessons from that one? I mean, it sounds like this sounds like a pretty visceral experience to be doing that for 10 years. So always be selling. Is there anything else?
The other thing I would say is very specific, but it's an HR thing. And I observe that it's a challenge at a lot of companies. But certainly it's been true in this company where I'm at now, in my last couple jobs. Great employees are really easy to see and identify. Everyone knows when you got a real star, you're like, that's a star. Really bad people in a normal company get fired. And that's also pretty straightforward stuff. But where I observe there's a real challenge in a fast growing company is getting rid of okay people. And I think it's really hard. I think you can have someone who is maybe doing their job all right.
Yeah.
But I think if your culture is to grow fast, I think you have to decide if that's the culture and if that's the objective. But if it is, all through the organization, you have to be willing to make some harder decisions about essentially swapping out people who are okay, who are often, by the way, and the hardest is when they're really nice. A nice person doing their job okay, but not great, in a fast-growing company has to go. And I was listening to some of the podcasts talking about Reed Hastings and the sort of culture within Netflix. And they've seemed like they've taken that to the extreme and really have it down. But I think it's hard to do. I think, the interpersonal stuff can act as real headwinds to keeping your company growing quick. But I think to grow quick, you need people who can not only deliver results, but have an appetite for it. They have an appetite to see, or I don't want to call them challenge junkies, but they really want constant growth. And it's hard to interview for that, to just ask someone. It's something that we find you sort of have to observe. And some people who start average become great. Other people start average and they just stay there. So that's the only other thing I would say in some years I felt like I didn't act on that enough.
Got it. So do you have is there any process or framework for weeding out the okay/really nice people?
These nice middle performers. So listen, one, I think there are a couple things, and one is during periodic review periods, whether your company does quarterly or semi-annual or annual reviews, to really try to get to that question of, how is this person pushing? And the second thing is we use a behavioral test now on all employees called the predictive index, which was something that was introduced to us through a board director about 4 years ago. And that has been very helpful.
Got it.
Both in terms of evaluating existing personnel as well as evaluating personnel that you're considering to hire.
Do you think it's better than the Myers-Briggs? Are they mutually exclusive?
I think it's better than Myers-Briggs. I think Myers-Briggs is so well known, and also the questions can be gamed reasonably easily. I think predictive index is the questions are so subtle that the candidate, especially, Myers-Briggs is so well known publicly that people just know it generally. But predictive index, I think, is less known, less obvious. And so a lot of the people who took the test, including myself, you weren't sure after you took the test what it was going for, but it does end up being very, very predictive. It's fascinating. And I have no economic interest in their business or anything. It really has been quite transformative for us.
Oh, well, you just said the word. I was going to ask how transformative, but you just said it. So I'm going to check it out afterwards for sure. And we'll drop this in the show notes too. But as we work towards wrapping up here, just two more questions for you. So I guess what's one new tool that you've added in the last year that's added a lot of value to your life? So could be like a Peloton bike, or it could be like Evernote.
It's not Peloton. I'm nearly so healthy. So I would say it's not a new tool. I would just simply say it's a really good decision to constantly upgrade your laptop and your computer. This is something that we really believe here. We basically replace everything every 2 years for everyone. It's just that the pace of business is so voracious and so fast now that it costs something to have downtime. And so I would say as one thing that I've really embraced over the last couple of years, even for me personally, is just really all the things that I do in my life. It's I'll give you an example. I bought a new phone when the new Apple iPhone came out. I'm not an Apple fanboy. I absolutely don't care about any of the whiz bang, any of the new cool things. I don't. But what I don't want to spend any time on is worrying about the battery life of my phone.
Right.
And even if it's Apple's fault, I do not want to spend time on it. And so I will upgrade the phone purely because I know that the newest phone does not have problems, and I can begrudge them for this, and I do not think it's fair. And I agree with all the consumer reaction to it. But as a business person, I'm evaluated on whether I'm delivering faster growth at MediaRadar, and I don't want to spend 4 hours on a weekend worrying about my phone battery.
Right. Makes total sense. Cool. Final question for you. What's one must-read book you'd recommend to everyone?
So first book that comes to mind for me is a book from 15 years ago. It was written by I'll email it to you right afterward, but it's one of the founders of Sony who wrote a great sort of history of Sony. And I think one of the things that I most took away from it and still think about is how in any company, there's a nucleus of people who really drive the whole boat forward. And when you're with these people like MediaRadar, I've been doing this a dozen years, and there's, over a dozen years, there's probably 25 people who've been here for most of those years who never left, and you're going through life together, right? These are people who probably, like me is a good example. I was not married when we started. I got married. I now have a dog, 2 children, like the whole thing. And in those years, a company, if you want to have fantastic talent, you have to treat those people well. And I don't just mean economically. You have to work around the fact that they're going through these life changes, and that some periods of time they will operate at peak efficiency and other times they may not. And while I think in general there's no point in having a huge amount of flexibility for a larger workforce, I do think when you're talking about the real people who drive so much value, that book really, I thought for me, put it in very personal terms of the level they went through sometimes to get the best people. And it sometimes was just so personal in terms of the way they recruited people. Anyways, that's my favorite book. And there are probably a whole bunch of books. It's about 15 years ago. I'll send you the exact name after I'm off the phone.
Todd, well, this has been fantastic. What's the best way for people to find you online?
Best way to find me is very simple. It's just Todd, TODD, at MediaRadar.com.
Love it. Todd, thanks so much for doing this.
All right, Eric. Be well. Thank you.
Thanks for listening to this episode of Growth Everywhere. If you loved what you heard, be sure to head back to growtheverywhere.com for today's show notes and a ton of additional resources. But before you go, hit the subscribe button to avoid missing out on next week's value-packed interview. Enjoy the rest of your week, and remember to take action and continue growing.